Now, what I want to do to start with is to share with you knowledge that he took in order to establish apometry. And one of the sciences he studied the most was physics. And today I want to share with you the part of quantum physics that he took in order to establish apometry. The scientific basis of reincarnation. That's what we are going to talk about this moment. He said, reincarnation is based on a non-local communication. Let's talk a little bit about local communication and non-local communication according to quantum physics from Dr. Goswami. Local signals. Let's start with local signals. Local signals, as he said, local signals communication propagates a little bit at a time through space that he calls dualism, time and space. That's local signals communication. Now, non-local signals communication, he says, means that without any intermediary, the objects communicate instantly. And it is called non-locality. And it was proved since 1982. So now, let's come back to the scientific basis for incarnation. Non-locality and spirituality, or non-locality and reincarnation. And see what he says. He says, while we live, or in a lifetime, while we are incarnate, we have two memories. One memory is strictly local, and the other memory is non-local. Let's see what one is and what the other is. Memory, local memory. He says, it is in the brain. It has to do with the content of what happened in our minds and the contents of what makes ourselves. For example, the year we were born is part of us. Parents, family, brothers, sisters, city. It has to do with what happened, our story, ourselves as human beings, and language and things. And that means it will not be that important, because he says this kind of knowledge stays in the brain and dies with it. And according to the incarnation you have, this knowledge is not important. It will be there, but it is not important. It will not be important for the progress of your spirit. The progress of your spirit is something else. It's not, because in another incarnation you can have different parents, different brothers and sisters, different language, different country, because you go around in order to learn more and progress. But this kind of information is in the brain, is recorded in the brain during a lifetime, and it dies with the brain. Now, let's go to the non-local memory. He says, the non-local memory is beyond space and time. And apometry is healing beyond space and time healing. Search. And he goes on. The other kind of learning that we do to develop ourselves, that's the non-local memory. The patterns of our habits, of our real selves. What else? That anything that we do to learn to develop our character, the character of our spirit, the real character, not the characters from a movie or theater. We are not talking about them. It is all the learning that we do to be in a lifetime and to do for ourselves that makes our characters, they are and are conditioned to us. They go to the spirit. And he said that in Sanskrit, it is called Akasha, which is Akashic memory, Akasha memory. And for the spiritists, we say the same thing. We use the same term, Akashic memory, and where everything is. Everything we have done is there. All the memories. We cannot delete memories. It will be there. So that's the basis of reincarnation. Because now let's go a little bit to Apometry. Apometry was established on no space and time. Apometry, the name itself is apo, beyond, and metry, measurement of time and space. So it is beyond space and time, which means in order to find the real root of the matter of the patient, if it has to do with the spirit obsession, or it has to do with unfinished business, or it has to do with the personality, trauma, and any kind of thing that you are in resonance with, and it is taking you. You go to other lifetimes. You go to use these non-local memories. He goes on and says, there are two domains of reality in quantum physics. The first domain is the above one that we call the spiritual world. That's the first domain, the real one. No-signal communication. The first domain is done with no-signal communication. And without any space and without time at all. It is instant communication or quantum non-locality. And it's proved since 1982. You see, the first domain is the reality, the true reality, domain of quantum physics, is the one above. And he goes on. The second domain, the one we live in, the physical world, is a local communication. It depends on signals, on time and space to move on, to have things done. Because we know that in order to live in a physical life, you need space and time for everything. Let's continue with with Dr. Goswami and what he has to say to us. He said, if this world, this physical world, is the manifestation of the spiritual one or the above world, which one is more real? As quantum physics says, it must be the one above that is real, true, that carries the reality. So if the one above, the spiritual world, is the one who carries the reality, the true reality, we are not the primary one. We are the secondary one. Now, he continues. Quantum physics says that this world, this physical world, is the secondary world, the secondary reality of the first world, of the primary world. Now, if this world, this physical world, is the purpose of the one above, we carry out the purpose of what is in there. How can we carry out the purpose, that purpose? He answers, by learning to quantum leap that world, the spiritual world, and bring back ideas. That's the way we can go and bring back. How many people other than Dr. Lacerda, and they continuing of Dr. Lacerda, how many people have done that? We know, if you go on history, you see many people who are called a genius, or whoever they are called, whatever name they are called. They are like illuminated. They came to that level of jumping of a quantum leap in the first and primary world and bring back ideas. And there is something else I want to tell you, and what I'm going to tell you right now is in the books, like the books of Chico Xavier. The many books he psychographed. The artists, most of them, during the time they are sleeping, they go to the primary source, the primary world, and get the ideas or see what they want, because they see it, and they make just a copy of that when they come back. And then you see beautiful things, beautiful art pieces and everything else. Because they went there, they quantum leaped and brought ideas. Now, that's the same principle of apometry. And Dr. Goswami goes on and says, this is quantum leap in the primary source and bring ideas. This is the second principle of quantum leap, principle of discontinuing or discontinuity of a quantum leap. What does that mean, this principle of quantum leap? First, let's understand what quantum leap means. Quantum leap, he says, is when one electron jumps from one electrical orbit into another one without crossing the intermediary space. That's quantum leap, and it has been proved. You go from one to the other without any need to interact or to go through the intermediary space. That's exactly what many people do, including Dr. Lacerda. He went there to bring ideas, and it was not like a snap, one day from one day to others. No, he formed a huge group of those who want to help him, mediums, experienced mediums, professionals, and people who were willing to make a difference, because they worked hard on their free time, on their spare time in order to do that. It was 3-4 times a week or more in order to prove everything and bring and establish apometry. So they spent time with patients from around the world who came to them, to the Spirit Hospital of Porto Alegre, South Brazil. And for many years, they got a lot of things, a lot of data and proofs, and all they did in order to establish apometry and the laws of apometry. That he did with, of course, the help of those who are on the other side, especially his mentor, who helped him a lot, because he was there always. He was in touch with his mentors always in order to do everything as much as he could. Now, he made that jump. It was all that thing. It was what Professor Amit Goswami want to say about the support, let's say, of the physics, quantum physics, to reincarnation. He has many things, many teachings, wonderful ones, science and spirituality. He has many different ways of saying, of talking about the way he does, to talk about quantum physics. But I took that in order to share with you just a little of what Dr. Lacerda and his team did for the basis of apometry. He started developing his mediumship, assisting people all for free as working spiritually, as a medium, developing and practicing. So when he finished 10 years of medical school and he became a surgeon guy and a gynecologist, at the same time he was dealing with the spiritual medicine. So he must have been the right guy to study all the things to establish apometry. So it was a conscious unfolding of the astral body under mental command. Conscious unfolding. The patient was conscious, was not under hypnosis. And the third thing he noticed, Dr. Lacerda understood that the cause of the success of that technique was not yet known, even by Mr. Rodriguez. Mr. Rodriguez did not say it had anything to do with spiritism. Maybe because he was afraid of the way people around the world looked on spiritism. And still now, people look down on you because you know the rules, you know everything. Many of them who don't understand look down at you. So maybe he did not want to say he had knowledge on that subject. So he did not mention. And he said, that's what he said. It's not exactly spiritism. So after the second session, Dr. Lacerda asked him if anyone could do that. He answered yes, anyone can do that. I am doing that. Dr. Lacerda did not lose time. He went home, and right away, that same day, he used the technique of hypnometry with his wife, who at that time was already a trained medium in the task. Both of them worked spiritually and knew a lot of things spiritually, and she supported him in every way he needed. He did not stop right there, and he said, that's it. What he did that day with his wife was with success. He understood everything and much more, and did not stop anymore. Let's see from that time on. Astral medicine happens with a limited separation between the somatic body and the psychic anatomy, the somatic anatomy and psychic anatomy of the patient. It goes with a limited separation. Second, the astral medical treatment is made on the astral body. What did he do? He sent the patient to an astral institution to be attended by astral medical doctors into astral medical offices with spiritual remedies, spiritual machines, and everything else. That's when the spiritism comes. And he finished saying something else. He said that the great medical doctor and psychiatrist of the future that's the doctor of the future. When you help them in here while they are incarnate, then when they go to the other side, you can follow them and heal them from the other side. Exactly this kind of thing is done right now through apometry and past life regression, depends on the case. Now, shortly after, he formed a great team that I would say team of researchers, team of missionaries. This team he formed was of systematic studies and scientific research to establish apometry. He was really headed on that. He was determined to do something. And he took what he learned with Mr. Rodriguez, did not agree with a couple of things, considering his knowledge on what he had already been studying, and made the group with responsibility, group made with doctors and all whoever wanted to be there to help him, and he went through it. Based on that, he changed the name Hypnometry, because there was no sleep, there has never been sleep. He changed it into Apometry. Since through the technique of Apometry, one can go far beyond time and space consciously. That's why he changed. There is no sleep. The patient is conscious, and anyone can see it easily. The patient sees the images and can talk to you consciously, and consciously the patient help himself understanding what's going on with his own life, if it is disease, if it is any kind of other problem like depression, like whatever it is, the patient will understand himself over what he has inside. So in 1975, on the 10th Pan American Congress of Spiritism, 10 years later that he was working on with apometry, he went to this Congress to present his thesis. This 10th Pan American Congress of Spiritism was held in Mar del Plata, Argentina. His thesis, Dr. Lacerda's thesis, was the science of spiritual applied to medicine, was apometry. The science of spirituality applied to medicine. It was done with a clear explanation of each part based on the experience of 10 years with people from Brazil and from around the world coming to them for healing. He went there with all his hope of doing something. But unfortunately, it was not, one more time, it was not received with good eyes. Was not received by many spiritists. medical doctors and non-medical doctors. They did not went through it. On the contrary, many of them criticized. You see? That's the way good things come, with a lot of trouble for you to establish it and then for you to go through it. But since then, a considerable number of spiritists who followed Dr. Lacerda has spread throughout Brazil and has increased the disclosure of apometry, despite the criticism of many spiritists, unfortunately. Apometry is there, and million people are being asking for help through apometry. Dr. Lacerda based the advanced technique of apometry on scientific and empirical knowledge. It was not, he did not spend 25 years with that great group of professionals working in both areas, on the conventional medical ways of treatment and spiritual medicine. They did not do that just for nothing or based on nothing. He based everything on studies and knowledge from mathematics, electromagnetism, quantum physics, psychology, psychism, and spiritism. Dr. Lacerda once said, apometry is not exactly a science, much less a philosophy or a religion. It is a powerful advanced technique based on laws and work of many years and great experiences with people from everywhere. And it is not a game, it is not religion. Anyone can do that, even from different religion, because what is considered is not religion. It is simply a powerful technique. That's what apometry is for sure. Now, Dr. Lacerda was the head of a psychic research division of the Spiritual Hospital of Porto Alegre for 20 years. Based on the many years of experience to establish apometry in its laws, he said, the techniques of apometry proved to be applicable to anyone, to any kind of person, independent of age, health, or mental state. Anyone can do apometry. Anyone can go to a group of apometry and work with. We had positive results even with patients of zero rationality, not reachable by hypnosis. We had good experience with them, like oligophrenics. We could touch them because they go to the soul. They bring the soul, they speak to the soul, they speak to the spirit. Even though the patient is with some problems, a mental problem or anything that, as he says, cannot be under hypnosis, is not reachable by hypnosis. Once you separate, you can speak to the spirit itself. And the spirit will answer the questions with no matter, with no problem. And then there is something else. It's not apometry, as he said. It's not a miraculous technique. But through the technique of apometry, one is able to assist people on the therapeutic treatment.
And so the point is that there is just one hypothesis that stands out. So it's no longer a hypothesis, experimentally verified idea. And that stands out is that these waves must be in a different domain of reality. Heresy. But which one? Is this statement heresy or the other way of believing heresy? The thing is, this is quantum physics we are talking about. It's verified zillion experiments. Without quantum technology, we cannot do anything hardly these days. Computer, cell phone, all of this stuff uses quantum technology. So there's no way you can say quantum physics is wrong and Newtonian physics is the right one. Not today. So who is committing heresy? Me for saying that there is two different realities, or you for saying, holding on to, sorry fella, Newtonian physics, one reality. So what happens? What happens? You don't want to give up your belief system, so you say, well, all right, there is this other thing, somehow it's taking place, but you can never prove it. What good is it if you cannot use it in some way? Yeah, that happens, but maybe it's just a mathematical artifice. Guess what? This is where paradigms started shifting. In 1982, a French physicist named Alain Aspect and his collaborators proved with an experiment that there are two kinds of communication. One kind of communication is indeed through space and time, and they take place with a finite speed, taking always a little bit of time. They are called local communication. Communication that goes through the locality and reaches you. But then there is this other communication. They proved it definitively, experimental data, that is faster than the speed of light. That has to be assumed in view of our theory of relativity, which is a verified theory, no way of refuting it in space and time. But there is this communication, which is instantaneous because it's faster than light. Experimentally, you can never prove instantaneous. You can only show that it is faster than the speed of light, and it's definitely faster than the speed of light, this communication. And therefore, scientists assume, since relativity theory is correct, there cannot be faster than speed of light communication in space and time. Therefore, there must be, notice the word must be, another domain that quantum physicists already have postulated, already have supported by experimental data. But this time, there is no doubting it, because you're doing something using this space. Before you could say, well, okay, so you have this possibility world, but you are not doing anything with it. You cannot. It's something that is the idea, maybe important, maybe not. But now people can use it. They're saying that no, we can communicate with each other faster than the speed of light. Non-local communication, not local, non-local. And using this outside of space and time domain of potentiality, where objects become waves of possibility. Difficulties? Yes, no, that's radical thinking. So admit it, a little difficulty is taking place right now. But on the other hand, if it is experimental fact, are you so dense that you have just complete ignoring the experimental fact, that kind of tendency? See what I mean? So scientists, because they have a lot of vested interest in the concept of Newton and stuff, continue to ignore this, and this is what is heresy, and this is what is blasphemy, and this is what we are fighting. This is why I have an idea called quantum activism, and I go around the world and saying that, look, all of you have to demand that, no, let this knowledge get out. Let this knowledge, we decide. You don't decide in the academy in the ivory tower with pointy heads talking. We decide, because this is not hard for us to understand either. It is very easy to understand, in fact, if we look at it without prejudice, right? As you are completely capable of. So then what happens? Two domains of reality. two domains of reality. Have you heard that idea somewhere else? Have you heard that idea somewhere else? Of course, you come to the church. That's where you hear such ideas. There is one reality, it's called heaven, and there is this other reality, it's called earth, but those are metaphors. The idea is that that reality is different from this reality. And all I'm saying is quantum physics has found a way of not only verifying it with a theory, but also verifying it with experimental data. Non-locality is experimental fact. There is indeed this outside of space and time. If you want to call it heaven, it's your preference. Who am I to object to that? There is this domain, and there is this domain. Now, what is the difference between human creativity and machine creativity? Because if you have the idea that brain is consciousness, and if you have the idea that brain causes our creativity, then we are thinking like we are machines, basically. That is what Newton said, and that's how many people. When we look at creativity, and what follows is that in creative experiences, we get to this intuition and take a long look at the intuition. That's what the insight is about. It's just taking a long look what you intuited already, what started your creative journey. And when we look at this insight, that gives us the surprise. The state that we are in is the same characteristic as people have been calling Holy Spirit, Holy Ghost for a long time. Ineffable, cosmic, this experience. I had it a few times, I know. And it turns out the way Stephen Colbert was making fun of it, he never had this experience. So he's not a creative guy after all. Because every creative knows this. Every creative person, every spiritual person knows this. Because you all of a sudden you fall into this state which is not your normal I, and yet it is you, because normal I is translating. It's simultaneously present oftentimes. We call it an experience of flow, where it is very clear that there is something else here that is guiding me, this I, this numero uno. It stops to be numero uno there, and there I'm cosmic. And there is clearly going back and forth between these two things that we call a flow. The reason that we watch Tiger Woods and not somebody else in golf, the reason we like watching the great basketball players who go into zone, and they just cannot miss basket after basket after basket. We love watching it. Why? Because we know that this is the epitome of creativity. This is the epitome of play of the ego with the quantum self, which spirituality is all about. Why do you come into the church? Because every once in a while, Bonnie will give such an inspired speech that you will get into this space where she doesn't exist and you don't exist and you are not separate anymore. You are not separate anymore. You are separate also, because, okay, somebody is sneezing, somebody is smelling. You don't have any problem seeing that, so you're separate also. But yet, that oneness, that's the experience O'Reilly knows, but Stephen Colbert doesn't know. What a change of attitude you get from this. So the situation is that what your experiences are is real. So when Jesus says, I know, my Father and I are one, I know, he has to have this kind of experience. Otherwise, how would he know? Because when you have the cosmic experience, you understand. It got to be that consciousness is cosmic, that God is everything. This is why Einstein says, I did not discover relativity by rational thinking alone.